One. Welcome to Painting Off Color.
Alright, cool.
This one was a doozy. Today I'm working on this guy, a copy of a painting from Minecraft. That skeleton one, the flaming skull. This is not going to be a perfect one-to-one, because I actually think the original pixel art in the game was a copy off of a professional painting. I just haven't sleuthed it and figured out who it was. So this is going to be an original piece by me. It is just taking heavy inspiration from it because I wanted to do something skeleton related to show to my friends. Skeletons are one of the first things you should practice when getting into art. However, I just drew what I took interest in, and I am reaping the penalties to that. The only times I've drawn skeletons and skulls is in like cartoon ways of doing it. Never been realistic. So trying to do a semi-realistic skull through this is more than a little bit of a challenge. This took a lot of attempts. It probably had the most attempts to do a sketch on the canvas, even though I had already prepped a sketch before. The first attempt was a failure because I tried to draw it the same way I would draw a head, like a normal head, not the skeleton. I didn't realize that it is not that simple, so I had to erase and try again. The second attempt was an even bigger failure because every single part of it was misaligned and misshapen. I was trying to get the basic shape of each part done, and that ended up being even worse than the first attempt. This was the third and final attempt because I finally got it right. I don't know what the technique is called, but I call it blocking, where you do certain inorganic shapes. Like for the eyes, I did goggles and did triangles and circles to surround each part, and it started getting pieced together correctly way quicker than the other ones, and each part was in the right spot. From this blocking, I was able to use each of those lines as guides for getting the rest of the shapes of pieces, and it actually started to look like a normal human skull. The jaw at the end kind of was misshapen, but it doesn't matter because that gets hidden later. Satisfied with the shape of the skull, I was ready to move on to drawing the hills, so I did an equidistant horizon line, and then from there I measured to see where I would put the mountains in a distance and where to put the moon. Because it was basically eyeballing from my reference that I drew based on the reference from the painting, it was all kinds of mixed up. But that just lended it to be its own original piece rather than being a copy, which the last thing I wanted it to be was just a carbon copy.
Okay.
Flames can be intimidating, especially if you're trying to do them realistic, because even cartoonish ones can be difficult, but trying to make them look like actual flames is astonishing in the simplicity once you get started. You kind of draw like the tips of torn cloth, like the edge of a fabric that is torn, and you kind of just go crazy with it, almost like you're drawing in hair. You just get the basic shape of where the plumes of flames are coming out, and it gets surprisingly fun and consistently. I went a little bit overboard, but that's okay, because I wanted to make sure I left enough room for the paint to leave room for the flame, so that it wouldn't be just the same color as the background, and then you're just painting something that's supposed to be bright on a surface that's already slick from the acrylic.
Okay. That's as good as it gets, I think.
The next part was very intimidating for me. I was trying something new. I have never painted with the paint knife. I've always just used brushes, and I wanted to try and see how it works. And as you could probably tell, I was struggling a lot, trying to keep it in the lines and trying to keep the knife spreading evenly. I think I got to a point where I was understanding how you're supposed to do it, and from what I understand, it's like you're screeding concrete. If you ever done that, you basically leave it just tilted up high enough to where it's not like just going flat against it, but not tilted so high that you're scraping up against the paper directly. You want to keep the paint flowing and coating as you move, and it pulling from the knife onto the canvas, almost like unrolling a roll of paper towels or cloth. To get the color of Green Hills, I got a green, mixed some orange in it to get it some depth to it, to where it looked a bit darker. And then from there, I mixed in some yellow to bring out the vibrance again. And in the end, it did get the right color. It just wasn't in the texture I was going for. This was a very troublesome process because I was stuck in the middle of trying to learn how to do something and pull it together in a cohesive way. Eventually, it was kind of getting the vibe I was trying to get, but I did ditch it and move to using brush. Switching back to the brush was like riding a bike. Really easy to get back into the rhythm of. But a pro tip, if you ever spend a lot of time erasing off a canvas, make sure you scrape the extra fibers from the eraser off of the easel before you start painting the bottom of the canvas. I was accidentally bringing some of those fibers up into the paint, which just was a bear to get back out. Painting the sky brought me back to my favorite part about painting, is just getting in the rhythm and just doing what feels right. After I circled the moon to make sure I wouldn't bleed into it too much, it was just a process of bringing the blue and like bringing it to purple and then deepening the purple to kind of fit the vibe of the work I was referencing. This was just serving to bring the piece together before I had to start working on the fire and the skull. I did notice through the process that I did leave some empty spots around the skull, parts that should have been filled with ground and with sky, so I filled it in best as I could while trying to make the original color I made. Flames are super intimidating if you haven't done them before. I hadn't done it prior to this, but if I can give one tip, if you're ever gonna draw or paint fire, just start doing it. Just start mixing in red, yellow, and orange, and just tag team each of them. Grab some red, throw it in. Grab some orange, throw it in. Grab some yellow, throw it in, and just start doing it until it starts looking like the fire. It might not end up looking how you want the first time, but the reason I spent so much time on it is because I was having so much fun on it. It's an addictive ritual or routine to get into. The skull was easier than it could have been. I could have made it way harder for myself by not doing all the details in it and just doing the shape around it the first time. But I blocked out parts in the actual sketch where I was going to add the darker shade and where I was going to add the lighter shade. I decided to go heavy on blues, even though the original one I think just had it black and white. But I went heavy on blue and added white to sort of like pull it out, and as it got illuminated, as you got out of the cracks of the skull. This is a patchy process. I was going back and forth in different areas to use the same shade before moving on to a lighter end, but I feel like it worked out the way I was doing it. I was happy with all the individual details, but I wanted to get the shape correct. So I think I did kind of like tarnish it a little bit by reshaping it where I did, but ultimately I think it worked out. In finishing it up, I noticed after I stopped recording, I completely forgot to do the moon. in on my Instagram will show what it looks like in the end, but basically it's not anything to write home about. I basically just used the same colors I used for the skull, um, placed in the shadows and in the bright parts of it, and pulled it together. I had a lot of fun making this one, even though it probably wasn't my best, but it all worked out in the end. So, thank you for watching, and tune in next time. Well, didn't mean to drop that, but that's, I think, good enough.